We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable.
The vast stretches of the unknown, the unanswered, and the unfinished.
Resistance and change often begin in the art of words.
Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The voices who can see alternatives to how we live now. The realists of a larger reality.
Welcome to the Cosmic Co-op. Hey y'all, we made it to episode 2. What do you know? I'm doing tasks left and right. It's like I don't even have ADHD. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm actually a beacon of creativity and productivity, and I cannot wait for this to last forever and ever and ever without ever stopping. This week, I cannot wait to bring you the conversation I had with my longtime internet friend, Astro colleague, Libra rising baddie, Neha. She is one of the smartest people I know. She's extremely dedicated to her crafts, of which she has many, and she does them all flawlessly, and I can't wait to share, oh my gosh, the nourishing conversation that we had. It was also quite fun. We got a little sassy with it because that's what we do. And I love talking to Neha about anything at all because she is such a disruptor, but she embodies the spirit of the disruptor in such a girly pop way. And this conversation just felt like an anti-capitalist slumber party, if I'm being honest. So you're going to love it. But before we move on to that, let's get to the Astro Mission Log for this episode because, you guys, Mercury retrograde is upon us again, and it's in Sagittarius this time, and it's just chaos, so let's talk about it. Okay, like I said, Mercury retrograde is here yet again, and Mercury retrograde actually happens 3 times a year, so it's okay if every single time is not complete chaos for you. I don't actually think it's supposed to be that way. But let's talk about this one. This Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, which is underway as of the time that I'm recording this, which is November 27th at 10:16 p.m. Pacific time here in Portland, Oregon, for you astro nerds who want to look this up. But basically, Mercury retrograde's here. The reason that it's more chaotic in Sagittarius is because Mercury is in detriment in Sagittarius. Not the coziest spot. The chaos gets turned up to 11. On top of that, the ruler of Sagittarius, who is Jupiter, is also currently in Gemini, which makes it a lot harder for them to operate in their normal ways. So we've got that mess going on. On top of that, while Mercury does their little backwards dance, we'll be squaring Saturn in Pisces, which is, if you don't know, a planet squaring Saturn at all just sucks for that planet. Like, sorry to this man, but it sucks to have to square Saturn. But, you know, we've all got to do it. The moon does it all the time. She seems to be doing fine. We've got this Mercury retrograde going on into December, and it will also include a retrograde Mercury cazimi in Sagittarius, which is just, you don't need to be an expert in astrology or even understand all of these terms to understand that there's multiple elements of chaos being added onto this fire when it comes to Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. The theme of disinformation has already been very, very prevalent throughout, I would say, pretty much the entirety of Neptune and Pisces since 2011. But this honestly just really feels like going out with a bang, and the disinformation is really getting turned up to a fever pitch. So I think it's important right now to not try to stir the pot, which is not my favorite thing to say because I actually love stirring the pot like so much. It's one of my favorite things to do. And Neha and I talk about this in our conversation as well, but Thanksgiving is this week, and it's very, very tempting, and I'm sure a lot of explosive conversations will be had across many tables this Thursday. But I think it's important to remember that when you are faced with somebody who is willingly ignorant, it's not your job necessarily to fix them, but it doesn't also have to be your job to abandon them and leave them to be somebody else's problem. This is where nuance comes in, and nuance is really tough. You don't need to be around people who are abusive to you just because it's the holidays. You don't need to intentionally put yourself in situations where you know that you could be harmed emotionally or even physically just to prove a point. You know what I'm saying? I hope you can take the spirit of what I'm saying and take the nuance of that and focus on which arguments are worth having. Picking your battles is very, very important here. We haven't even talked about the other element of chaos here, which is that Mars will be stationing retrograde in Leo at the beginning of December and eventually moving backwards into Cancer. But we've got Mars stationing retrograde, Mercury's retrograde. There's a lot of fighting words in the air. And as much as I love fighting words, I think there's something to be said for discernment, especially right now, especially when we are moving into, in the Northern Hemisphere, the darker months of the year where we're going to need to preserve our energy. And also maybe, if you want to be morbid about it, moving into just darker times in general and needing to really figure out what's worth our energy and what we can do within our spheres of influence that will be worthwhile. So take that with all the love in the world and enjoy this conversation between me and Neha. You are such a multifaceted person. You, much like me, you do so many things and you do them all so well. What's your general business? Like, how did you get here today? And
Yeah.
what do you got going on?
How did I get here today? So, just a TLDR, this is your first time meeting me on the interwebs. I like to say astrology is your story, human design is your strategy, energy is the work, and I am your meditation teacher, Neha. I started my business in 2018. I actually first started offering astrology readings though March 2nd of 2017. I was 20 years old.
Oh my
And
gosh.
basically I started my business because I had a mentor at that time who I'm no longer in connection with. But at that time, I thought they were just so cool. And they were like, oh my God, you're so smart. And then I also met other people and other mentors, other people encouraging me. And then I would also just have friends and coworkers just be like, stop reading our charts and go start a business. And I didn't really know anything about business, to be honest. Like, I never thought that that's what I would do. So, like, it was not really a very, let's just say it was a very counterintuitive process. However, at the same time, it was very intuitive when I was listening to myself. So I did that. Well, you can still find my very, very old Kim Kardashian chart reading on YouTube from 2017. And my style of doing astrology has really changed. But I started practicing astrology because basically a Nepali shaman or like a chakri stayed with our family. He was doing other divination. He didn't actually do astrology like that, but he said little things. And like our culture, like Hindu culture in general, has astrology infused into it. I'm from Nepal. And so it just like sparked my interest. And then I basically Googled more things and I found a moon sign calculator and I learned that I was a Scorpio moon. I had known I was a Leo my entire life and the math was mathing there. Like I always knew I was a Leo, like a theater kid, just very bubbly and like sunshine energy, you know. And then I found a Scorpio moon and it just kind of validated my darkness. And like, let me just tell you, the internet in 2009 about astrology is not what it is today. It was like, you are dark, you are vindictive, you are awful. You are the dark side of the moon. But there was something about that that actually resonated in the sense that like, I just feel like I'm a very high contrast person. This is a very long-winded ass answer, but all this to say, I just like saw myself in a whole new way. And basically I started secretly studying astrology for a few years for a while, like from like 2009 until like 2015. Pretty much like if I told people, I was like, you can't tell anyone. Like I kept it super low key, very Scorpio moon ass shit. But like the cool thing is my sister was born a year or two after I got into astrology and I literally saw her chart before I met her as the baby because she was born at night. So I was just like watching like George Lopez or something random on TV late at night and my dad calls me and tells me that she was born at her birth time and I immediately pull up her chart and I don't know like how much I knew astrology, but I knew enough to just look at the circular chart and be like, oh, that's my bestie right there. And so she's like my favorite little case study because I've truly seen her like bloom into herself over the years. So like that's where like my love of astrology came from, and honestly the business part came a lot later. The business part was like oh, this is more for survival. This is like I truly can't do anything else. I
Mm-hmm.
started my business, so like I was under my mentor, but then like that mentorship kind of got really weird in terms of like I don't know, she was just unreliable to say the least. I just was in college at that time and I was just looking around and I was like, these bitches don't care about learning. Like, this is like corporate training ground. Everyone
Right.
here wants the like cookie cutter lifestyle. No one's connected to themselves. Like, no one is like thinking for themselves. Like, it's all just stupid. And then I was like, why don't I just start my own business? So I did. And like, funnily enough, that happened to be on a eclipse on my midheaven.
Oh, wow.
Um, and the moon was benefically enclosed. And when I like saw that when I was learning electional astrology, I was like, damn, fate really popped off with that one because I couldn't have even elected a better chart. And it's
Right.
also a Leo rising.
Oh,
So
that's so beautiful.
I know. So that's when I started a business. I was 21 at the same time. I was also in school. I just started working at the Apple store. So I was booked and busy for a few years after that. Started just offering astrology readings. I found human design, which I know can be controversial, saucy. Oh my God. I can unpack that another time. It's not for this episode. I found that, but to be honest, I came into it so innocently and like I still use it because it literally tracks. I'm like, unless I'm lying to thousands of people that I've never spoken to, there has to be something to this.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's how I got there. And it's been like a really slow evolution. In 2020, I got certified in life coaching, hypnotherapy, EFT tapping, Reiki. Like basically, when North Node was in Gemini, that's also when I found traditional astrology. I was like, let me learn everything. 'Cause in our ninth house. So I was just basically on a learning kick, at the onset of the pandemic, like 2020, 2021 time. And then I basically had a mentor breakup. Like a lot of the coaching people that I was connected to, and specifically people that I thought were my friends and I thought that were like really important to me, it was a lot of facade. So that broke a lot of what I thought and navigated business from. I think that's something we'll talk about today, which is why I bring it up. Like the way that basically I know a lot about doing business from what I see, and I was like, I don't want to do that, and
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of like astrologers of older generations or life coaches or whatever they might be. This is very much my out of sect malefic is in my ninth. Teachers rise and teachers fall, and that's the nature of a cadent house. Like when a teacher has taught their lesson, like they fall away.
Yep.
That's cadent energy, baby. Also, like having my out of sect malefic there, it's no wonder that like I experienced a lot of trauma in college. And a lot of times I realized like
Mm.
you can't put people on a pedestal because people ain't shit. And it's not even like a people ain't shit and I want to demean or degrade them as a person, but rather like their behavior doesn't always match up with their words. And like honestly, like we're recording this November 11th, 2024. Like,
Mhm.
47 is now apparently going to be in office nasty and like oh man, that was so traumatizing. My mind went blank. LOL, I remember that man. But like we're at this time period where like
Yeah.
honestly, if you move funny, if you move like out of your values or like your actions speak louder than words. And if I can't see your values through your actions, like I don't want you in my inner circle. And like that's honestly
Mm.
like where I'm at. And like I think this also ties into like money
Oh,
and
yeah.
all these other things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. You just in explaining your story had so many pieces of wisdom, which I love. I love what you said too about like the ninth house being a cadent place and teachers fall away. For me, not putting teachers and people on pedestals is, yeah, for me, it's the people ain't shit, but it's in the sense of like we all ain't shit and like
Hmm.
in like a
Hmm.
spiritual way. So, so it doesn't make
We're
sense
all
to,
the shit and we all ain't shit. Like
yeah.
both and yes.
Yeah, so like it doesn't make sense to treat another person that way.
Hmm.
Um, I've had similar experiences with my mentors when I was in the MLM that I was in for 5 years, where even to this day, I'm like, I deeply love and respect those people, but I was positioning them in my life in a way that like ultimately was not helpful for me, even though I thought it was
Hmm.
helpful. And I learned a lot about discernment, about who's actually qualified to be my mentor and what that means. Like, yes, life experience qualifies you. Yes, paper knowledge, right? What I call like degrees and certifications and stuff. Like, those can also be forms of qualification. But I learned that you cannot force a relationship. Like, the relationship is the most important part. And you can't force a mentor-mentee relationship. And that's kind of essentially what that whole business was like predicated on.
Right.
Yeah, I learned and when was it? You said North Node in Gemini. That was like
North Node in Gemini. I don't remember when I first moved, but I know we had our first eclipse like June 2020. We had 5 eclipses in 2020 because there's usually 2 lunations per eclipse cycle, but because of where the nodes were positioned at that time, 3 lunations happened all within like basically 18 degrees of the nodes. And so, damn, we had 3 eclipses. And if we remember that time period, this is essentially a few months into COVID.
Yep.
And like,
yeah, the nodes switched to Gemini and Sagittarius in May 2020. So
yep, the math is mathing.
Woo.
That was also when we had quote unquote America's racial reckoning, which like I think we're now in the backlash of. Like it was a bunch of trauma responses trying to help other trauma responses, and that didn't turn out really well. And like those were valid trauma responses, let me be clear. And at the same time, like that's where a lot of like my, I guess, activism and how I show up for like social causes, political causes that are important really transformed. Cause I'm like, a lot of people are saying one thing, however, they can't sustain that in action, even if they're doing their best, even if they have the best intentions in the whole wide world. And a lot of people don't have the best intentions in the whole wide world. So seeing that, I think, was a really breakthrough point for me. Like my number one philosophy is like we have to treat each other like whole human beings because we are, and we can't do anything if we can't do that.
Right.
In 2018, I don't know, I guess I foresaw the future. Maybe like, I did actually see that Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, all the fucking nodes conjunction in January 2020. And I have a bunch of tweets from 2018 and 2019 where I'm like, just know your bubble's gonna burst January 2020. Just know shit's gonna get real at January 2020. I don't think I had the astrology skill yet to tell you what exactly that would be, but I was like, some governmental weirdness is gonna happen for sure, for sure. But because of that, like, and I studied public health for a while in college, my business's motto from the jump was public health starts with the individual. For me, I was speaking less public health like epidemiology and all these things. I was speaking more like generational trauma and fourth house shit. And like if we want to create spiritual, emotional, mental well-being, like mental health is like one of like psychology, econ, and public health were the things I studied. And if we want a healthy public, like it starts with like I can't force anyone else to heal. I can only like show up and walk my walk. I don't actually agree with a lot of behavior psychology anymore. However, like in behavioral psychology, a principle that I think is just a general human universal truth is that kids and generally people learn more from role modeling, like if someone's modeling a behavior versus just saying it. You know, it's like the parent who's like, kids, stop using your phone, while the parent is like scrolling on Facebook or IG Reels or whatever.
It's
the fuck,
100% true.
Yeah, because the parent is engaging in that behavior. Why wouldn't the kid? Like, of course, like.
And this is why I don't try to stop my son from having any screen time, because I'm on my fucking screens all the time. So I know what I'm modeling. So then it becomes, if I want him to do something, I have to change my behavior first. Which is so infuriating as a parent sometimes.
Annoying.
Because yeah, words, lecturing, doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
No.
They don't care.
That's why those Thanksgiving conversations don't work, Brenda.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. You probably saw me going off about this last night.
Yeah, I did.
I just get so fed up because every 4 years there's an election at the beginning of November, and then people who aren't happy about it are like, I can't wait to ruin Thanksgiving. I think if that's what's accessible to you, if that's the only thing that's accessible to you, and you have a life that allows you to alienate your family members in such a way, great. Like, fine. Go ahead. But for the majority of people, that's just not how, if you want to affect genuine change in people's minds and in their hearts, that is not the way. So there's so much nuance to be held there. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'm always going to tell people, like,
do what's accessible to you, do what's safe for you to enact the change you want to see in the world, whatever that is. But this whole idea of just like, I can't wait to just sit at Thanksgiving dinner and tell my grandma she's a racist. Like, I mean, it feels good. Yeah, it feels great. I was back there in 2020, like that was me. So I hold a lot of compassion for people who are in that space still. But I just think it's like me, an intellectual, judging people for doing something I only recently learned to stop doing. That's what was weird to me in this last week with all the election bullshit and everything was like, I remember how I felt 8 years ago because I was living in Portland like I am now. My life was a lot different, but I was working in a breakfast spot in a really predominantly upper class white neighborhood. And I remember that morning after the election, the first time this man was elected, and there's all these women like holding each other and crying and then in the cafe. And at the time I was just like, yeah, like we're feeling our feelings. And I still think that that's a great thing to do, like to hold space for each other and feel your feelings. But now, 8 years later, the thing that I noticed that I didn't have back then was like, back then I just felt angry, right? Which is totally valid. I'm still angry. That hasn't gone away. Anger, great. At least you're feeling a feeling. That's where I'm at now.
I've been to the party anger.
Yeah, like at least you're feeling anything, okay? And if anger is where you have to start feeling your feelings, great, do that. But now, and like in the last week, I was really struck by like, I felt this like huge softening inside of myself, which I literally was not expecting and don't even honestly know how to describe. But I felt such a softening inside myself because I just felt for the first time like the anger was still there. But because I've been feeling it and I've been processing it for like 8 fucking years now, it was like, it was still there in the background. But the predominant feeling was like sadness and so much love too, because I'm like, I just realized I'm like, so many people are misled. And the people who are quote unquote voting the wrong way or making the wrong, the individuals, the normal people, I'm talking about the people who just go to their jobs every day and then they vote. I'm not talking about the people in power. I'm talking about average regular voters out there. I just felt I was overcome by just so much softness inside of my body, which I was so not expecting. And I was just like, oh my God, so many people genuinely think that they are doing the right thing. And that makes me sad. They think that they're doing the right thing. And then people who, I don't want to say on my side, but people who align more with my political values are going to those people saying, you're bad, you're evil, this is your fault, why is he in office again? This is because of you. And like, but everybody in this situation thinks that they're doing the right thing. I don't know, something about that just made me feel so soft inside and just genuinely sad too. Like I just felt a genuine sadness instead of just anger. I was like, God, I'm just so sad that so many people have been misled to believe that this is the right thing. And they genuinely think they're doing something good for themselves and for their country, and that just makes me fucking sad. Less than being angry of like, how dare you vote for this person? I'm like, you've been misled. And it just makes me sad. It was something I really didn't expect. I'm used to anger. Like I'm used to the irritation, the constant irritation every time I have to think about politics in this country. But I was not ready for that. I was not ready for the sadness and the softness. And it wasn't like a pity either. It was just like I'm so sorry this is happening. I'm so sorry that you've been successfully misled to believe that this is the right thing to do. And yeah, I don't know, I've just kind of been really sitting with that. And so maybe that's also why I've been more like annoyed than usual about people being like, I can't wait to go home and yell at my family members this Thanksgiving. I'm like, but this is just so sad. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing.
Really sad. Yeah, I feel so many feelings at once. I relate to the softness and there's been so many conversations about literacy rates in response to the election results, which like I think can get really weird really fast. So I like to be really mindful because like neither of my grandmothers were entirely literate, but they were not stupid. So just because people did not have systemic access to education or familial circumstances, health circumstances, like there's so many ways that human that we cannot possibly, I cannot have that much nuance in one sentence. Anyways, so I want to make that clear. Like people who are struggling or struggle with literacy or, have a lower literacy rate compared to their age or developmentally where they ought to be, I don't want to say should, where they ought to be, they're not necessarily stupid. And at the same time, we have to be like honest. Like, it's not a coincidence that I think Massachusetts is the most educated state in America, and they primarily voted blue. And I'm not even saying Kamala is our savior. Please do not get me fucked up. Okay. No. Okay. Please, let's be honest. And at the same time, the DNC doesn't have a backbone. Anyways, that's why the Republican Party's message hits, because they have a really simple message. It's consistent. You can get on board or you can get off board. You have a very clear reaction versus Kamala gets really mixed reactions. And it's not even just Kamala. Kamala also has the layer of misogynoir that other DNC candidates historically have not had. So I just want to also name that. And then I also think like Obama being our first Black president awoken such a racist underbelly of the country that's slowly been like indoctrinating more and more people. Like, it's like a contagious thing. Like, because, and this is why I really want to move from this place that we're all whole humans, is because I grew up in Texas. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I also lived in Austin briefly. So I grew up around all sorts of people that you cannot stereotype. Let's just say that.
Right.
Black Republicans who go to church and have Black Jesuses at their home and are very pro-Black, right?
You can always tell when somebody has never actually been to the South or interacted with real people in the South, because they think it's all cowboys who love guns and Jesus. And like, sometimes it's like drag queens who love guns and Jesus. Like,
literally,
you've really got to hold.
Oh my God. So I looked up the libertarian candidate who was on the presidential candidate, and his name is Chase. I forget his last name, but he is from Georgia. And I read probably the best sentence I might have read ever on Wikipedia, which is like, the Gazette reported him to be a pro-gun, pro-police reform. He's against Cop City, pro-choice candidate, libertarian, who is armed and gay. That last part took me out.
Armed and gay.
I was like, yes, because this is the South, okay? This is the American South, okay? And that like made me cackle. I'm like, you will find people who, like, if you're trying to caricaturize people, like, because that's who I grew up around, you won't reconcile those identities using, I don't know, whatever the fuck online discourse is these days. So growing up around people who are very real people who have a mismatch of belief systems, depending on their life experience, their family circumstance, their XYZ, the media they consume, the echo chambers that they are in, where they've traveled to or where they've not traveled to. Can they travel? Do they have access to travel? All of these factors, right? These are all whole people. And I'm not saying you even have to be nice to them. I think I tweeted, I posted something on Threads, like, you know, critique people's like behavior, not their like personhood. And some people, like, I actually had one really constructive convo where we broke it down a little bit, but someone was like essentially like trying to accuse me of like placating the empire, playing nice to violent people. And I was like, I gave the example, if I have a trans friend, because I have many trans friends, and say one of them and I end things on bad terms, am I going to stop using their pronouns? Am I going to like be transphobic all of a sudden because one trans person pissed me off? No, because they're a whole person.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm just like ranting at this point.
I've kind of started to move that way too, in terms of what you said about critiquing behavior instead of personhood, because people are truly so vast, and it's always around these election years too that I start to notice the polarization obviously get a lot stronger, and there's a lot of reasons for that, people clinging to like their sense of control. But truly, even the whole thing about like, oh, a red state and a blue state, there's no such thing as a red state or a blue state. There's no such thing as a red county or a blue county. Like, the majority, because that's how democracy is supposedly set up, but like, people are so much more vast and complex than that. And that's the thing that also makes me angry around election years. It's like another thing that people want to have a data point to reduce people to, like how you're voting on things now. And again, I think people can be really easily misled. You were saying about literacy made so much sense to me, because I was reading about in California, there was that proposition that did not pass that was going to like effectively end slavery in California. And everybody was so mad. They're like, all of these, however many millions of Californians voted to keep slavery. California is not that blue. It's not that safe. I'm like, okay, putting that aside, I went and read the actual proposition. And I'm a literate person, right? I read, I write, I went to college, and I had to read that proposition 3 times to truly understand what exactly it was saying. And not because it was like worded unclearly, but I think people genuinely, when literacy is not a strong point, the double negatives confuse people. If a proposition says, you know, voting for this would prevent something or end something, or it would make it so that XYZ would not happen if you're just not the most literate person, or like you've been failed many times by the system is the more appropriate thing to say, then that shit can honestly just be confusing, you know. And like
So confusing.
people overlook the fact that like even these propositions are worded sometimes really unclearly. Even for an educated person such as myself, I was like, I had to really read it and make sure, okay, so to end the slavery, I would want to vote. And I had to like really make sure. And so that's not to excuse the fact that there's probably many people who still feel that slavery is a good thing, but it's just one of those things where it's like,
it's not, it's a really skewed data set because there's so many things going on behind the voting booth that you don't get from exit polls, that you don't get from yes, no, maybe so. Like there's not even a maybe so. It's just yes or no. Like when I saw someone say that Massachusetts is the most educated state and they voted blue, like also this is another moment that would probably break people's like stereotypes in their mind. Black women are the most educated demographic statistically in this freaking country. And they were the biggest voters against Trump. Let's say that. I want to say that piece about breaking stereotypes. And like, I think like the conclusion of all this is like their go-to tactic is still divide and conquer. So if we are moving from a place of wholeness, and again, this does not mean taking any bullshit. Like, first of all, you, Sam, are a person who does not take bullshit. I am a person who in my adulthood is learning not to take bullshit, you know? So like, don't get me fucked up. And at the same time, like divide and conquer is like a classic technique for a reason of systems of power that either want to enforce their power or maintain their power or like create violence with their power, because if they can divide and conquer, they will get other people to do their bidding for them, like the people who are like, oh, I'm gonna call ICE, like do y'all hear yourselves? Like let's like zoom out, let's hear ourselves for a second.
Yeah, seriously. And this is so appropriate because I realized that Venus just crossed the ascendant where I am and moved into Capricorn. I feel like this is really appropriate for Venus and Capricorn too, because I was thinking about what you were saying. Divide and conquer is such a simple tactic, right? And it also pisses me off how easily people fall for it. Even the psychological hoops that they'll jump through when somebody says like, hey, maybe don't do that, right? And they're like, oh, so you're defending Nazis now? So you voted for Trump? And it's like, hey, whoa. I'm not saying that you need to maintain or defend power structures. I'm not saying that like we're all going to hold hands and kumbaya and do a bunch of performative shit. I'm saying that what's going to be more useful if we all want to survive anything is to look at people as whole people, as whole universes. And you can disagree with their behaviors. You know, people always, want to take this to an extreme point because nuance is just, when Jupiter went into Gemini, I was like, nuance is either going to be really easy or really difficult. And I'm learning that it's really difficult. Like just the other day, somebody was like, oh, you're a Trump voter because I said something along the lines of like, hey, maybe you shouldn't take out your election rage on like your working class neighbors who probably voted Trump.
Oh
you know,
God,
like,
LOL.
And they were like, oh, so you voted for Trump. That's not what I said. But I'm saying that like, your working class neighbor who's just trying to fucking survive and voted Trump because they genuinely thought that was the right thing to do. Like, that's not your enemy. It's just an easy person to be mad at right now. And that feels really good. Another thing I've just been saying to people is like, your anger is good and you should feel that, but also don't let it become misplaced. You know, don't let it become misdirected is what I'm seeing. And that's like the divide and conquer thing that you're talking about. Like our anger is wholly misdirected.
Yes.
Yeah. What you were saying too, like Black women are the most educated demographic in this country. I owe a lot of my early adulthood, like early radicalization to Black queer women from the South. I was dating someone who was friends with a lot of those people, and then they kind of took me in as this like little white girl. And they weren't like sitting me down and teaching me things, you know, they weren't like lecturing me. It was just through being who they were. You know,
Exactly.
it changed a lot of who I am, you know, and how I view the world and things like that, and the radicalization process. You know, it probably would have taken me a bit longer, I think, to reach that point if I hadn't had, you know, interactions with these. Yeah, they were educated at college degrees, just like the gayest women ever, and they were so like fucking smart. And yeah, the thing too is that people, like you were saying about being in Texas, like when you do happen to live in a bubble, a liberal bubble, it's very, very easy to see other places like that as a monolith. I keep trying to point out to people that that shit is intentional.
Yeah.
So much of this is by design, you know, for us up here in the Pacific Northwest, all these fucking idiots, these white men in tech who are like, we're gonna secede with Canada and we're gonna call it Cascadia. You like
Wild.
could not handle you could not handle walking down the street in Dallas. Like it would just make your brain explode, I feel. Dallas is also a liberal center in Texas, but
Yeah.
it's the need to caricaturize and turn other groups into a monolith, or regions of the country or the state voted this way. You guys are falling
Right.
for it, and it pisses me
Yeah.
off. Like,
Yeah.
I love you,
And
but you're falling for it.
Yep. And like the reason that you were able to learn so much by being around Black, queer, femme, women,
Mhm.
you know, just being themselves and
Mhm.
living their lives
Mhm.
is because, again, that goes back to what we were saying, like people learn more from modeling than they do
Mhm.
from being lectured at. And
Mhm.
like what I learned, because basically I've been in Houston since I was like end of kindergarten, and I never went to a predominantly white school the entire time I was in Houston.
Mhm.
Then I went to the University of Rochester in upstate New York, which like is quote unquote New York, liberal, like whoa, you know? And when I tell you people did not know how to act, people were acting out of pocket, like they had never been around South Asian people, like it's not a coincidence that like me and my close friends that I still have from those times are all people of color. And if they're not people of color, they're Jewish. Like,
Yeah.
which is like another like identity that experiences marginalization. And
Yeah, and
so
othering. Yeah.
and othering, exactly. I remember me, my friend Tyler, and my friend Aya, and we had a post on Instagram that was like the best people to cross the Dixon line with, LOL. Honestly, like stepping out of your little bubble, whatever it might be, and like just interacting with people and practicing relational skills, because you won't get better at relational skills until you practice.
That's really what I keep coming back to. And it feels like the winding down of having the nodes in Aries and Libra, you know, and like especially the
Mm-hmm.
fact that it's the South node in Libra. Yeah, we are really getting to the bottom of what it means to relate to another human being. And
Yes.
also at the same time with the North node in Aries, we're getting to these extremes of othering too, you know, like
Yeah.
finding any excuse to put somebody in an other bracket to make you feel better than, or just safer or more control or whatever it is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and it's really hard on the note of relating too, right? I've been focusing more of my energy. I still like to be on social media. I love to stir the pot. Like, I figure if I've got this following, I might as well do something with it. But like, social media is not the place for nuance or good faith interactions really most of the time. Like, they do happen, but I've been trying to put more of my energy into different places where the conversations can be held more in good faith and the nuances there. That's something that I've been telling people more lately too. Like, if you're going to process your feelings about this election or anything, do that. That's very important. But don't do it with the whole internet. Don't process your raw, fresh, evolving emotions with the entire world, because those
No.
people don't know you. They're not going to hold you in good faith. They don't know your nuances. They don't know your history. You need to do this with people who can hold your entire personhood and to keep that in the conversation. And that's just not going to happen on social media. It's important to feel our feelings, but you need to feel your feelings in the appropriate containers, or else it just results in more division and more of that constantly othering people.
Yes.
It's tough to draw that line because we're in the age of no nuance right now, is what it feels like. Nobody wants nuance, but that's also always where I'm going to be. Because that's just like who I am. I'm a Libra rising, you're a Libra rising. You have like Gemini placements that are in prominence. I have my South node in Gemini. And so I also feel like a lot of what's been bringing up with Jupiter moving through Gemini for me is a lot of stripping away of where I want my work and my energy to be proliferated. Who do I actually want to see my work and interact and engage with it? Because I used to think that it was like for the whole world and for everybody, and like everybody should learn about anti-capitalism. It's great, and it's like actually not everybody is ready for that conversation. And where I have found myself in my business, or at least with this platform and where I've been so far, as I'm like, I am that. It feels like that bridge between the people who are certain that the way the world is right now is not correct, right? And they are certain that something needs to change and that capitalism is probably a part of it. And they're willing, people who are willing to look into that and to bridge that gap between the question. I call it like I help people come out as anti-capitalist, which is really funny, but like it's because I feel strongly that if you just take enough time to sit down and really examine all of these power structures, it will kind of always lead you back to the same conclusion, which is like capitalism. And not just capitalism, but the like Venn diagram of all these intersecting, colonialism and racism and how all these things, white supremacy, they support and feed into each other. If you just take any amount of time to like think deeply or research for more than 10 minutes, like you will hit this wall. So, that's why I'm here. I'm here for the people who have like hit that wall, where they're like, okay, I know that there's something going on here. Something that's not right. What are your general feelings about anti-capitalism? Like, is that something that you would say that you actually identify as or agree with, like as anti-capitalist?
I would say so. I would definitely say like I'm anti-capitalist. I actually studied econ. So I studied what capitalism is like as a teenager. And at that time, what I thought was the solution was like, I guess what people would now say conscious capitalism. Like, I don't know if I would have used that language, but the idea of like, we can do good things with capitalism. Yes. And I'm also not a communist, let me say that also. Like, I don't know what I am. Like, maybe I'm a secret third thing, okay? Like, I don't know. Like, I really am like, we can't think of more things. We can't evolve political theory more. Like, let's be honest. Like, why are we arguing over these two philosophies as if they're the only ones? Anyways, but like capitalism at its core, one of my friends from a somatic teacher training we did, Dahlia, she asked me, she's like, y'all, do you think there's a such thing as conscious capitalism? I think something like that. And our other person in our little small group, Katie, was like, what a good thought experiment, And then I'm like, I thought about this for a decade. No, there's not.
I've been doing this thought experiment for years. So.
Yes. I was like, I've been waiting for this moment. My mini-gen waiting to respond asked was like, oh. And like basically I just broke down like 10 years of thought in like, I don't know, 20 minutes. And both of them were like, damn, we should have recorded that. But like if I were to remember what I said, what's his name? Adam Smith? Adam Smith is the father of capitalism, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. I get his name and John Adams confused sometimes. Anyways, Adam Smith. So if I were to break down one of the things that I learned in my econ classes to reason why is just capitalism not it? Because the theory is like whatever I do best, I'm going to make this the most micro example ever. So like say I am really good at blending astrology and human design. And Sam, you're really good at talking about astrology and money. Awesome. And then and my friend is really good at making art. Okay, awesome. So these are all things that we like to do and we would like to make a living doing. Capitalism says we must maximize the output and we must do as much of that one thing as possible to maximize those outputs. But that is just not how life works. That is just not how nature works. That is just like when you plant the same crop in the same soil year after year, you will not be yielding the same results.
Nope.
If I do astrology nonstop and I intertwine astrology with my livelihood, with my survival, with me making sure I'm getting fed and I have a home and my loved ones are taken care of, all those things, astrology is not going to feel the same way it did at the beginning of this. Why do people why is there the stereotype of corporate, like you walk in after college like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and like 20 years later you're jaded as fuck and you're just there for your fucking 401k and your stock shit and like whatever, right? That's why that happens. Like you go from thinking you like something to hating it, like how many times like my friends like in college, like I'm gonna go into finance and I'm gonna make a difference, and like I'm thinking about one of my friends, like she quit that shit and does her own thing now, like and she got value from it. She, made money from it. And at the same time, it's not what people thought it was in college, And so just like how if you're a parent, you might love being a parent, but if you are only a parent all the time and you have no room for anything else because it's not quote unquote efficient or making productivity within the system, then it's pointless. Like, that math is not mathing, and that's not sustainable. And that is why even people who wouldn't call themselves anti-capitalist are perusing the late stage capitalism subreddit, and being like, maybe some points are being made. A lot of people are feeling like the system's not working for them. Now, what the MAGA party is effectively communicating is they're saying the system is not working and you're struggling right now because we need to bring it back to how the system used to be.
Yep.
And we need to suppress people more and oppress people and subjugate them, and it's their fault. Like, when has that ever worked for humanity? Let's be serious. Anyways, not this shit. This was a horrible week to know history because I was like, damn, I can't even pretend this is not anything. But it was actually a good week to know history. Like, I'm grateful for my education. And at the same time, like, how we fight that is not by, like, we cannot solve the system within the system. Audre Lorde, like, you cannot dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. I might be butchering the quote. Hopefully I'm not. But general gist, like, we have to, like, go into our imagination. Like, this is where I think Ari Felix's work, like the Dream Mommy's work, is really helpful. Like, world building. And then something I learned in my coaching certification is we can support our subconscious mind by being towards motivated versus away motivated, which Ari teaches about without having directly said that. Because it's like, what are we moving towards? What are your values? Like, what is the world you want to see? And like, how can we bring that into our real life, into our bodies, into our minds as much as possible? Versus, like, you gave the example of you at Thanksgiving all those years ago. Like, yeah, it felt good to argue, but was that really moving you towards your values and the world you want to see and dismantling these systems? Like, did it really do the thing, or was it just really nice and cathartic for like 30 minutes?
Right. It felt good for a minute. No, I'm so glad you brought up Ari, because literally I was thinking about them this week when I told you I was feeling like this really unexpected softness in reaction to like the election results. And I was thinking about them and how they've been talking about for the last couple of years, teaching about like the Great Defrosting. And I was like, oh my God, it's me. Like, it's happening to me. Like, I am defrosting because, like, yeah, it's just been so easy to be against. And like, this is even a discussion that I have like inside my course, because I teach about anti-capitalism and astrology and the overlap of it. And we've even had discussions in there about calling it anti-capitalism because it's positioned as something that is against, right? The oppositional politics. I think that's actually what it's called, being anti-anything, right? To me, it's very Saturnian. So it just makes natural sense to me to position myself as against something. And also, like you said, like being a manifesting generator, I'm always responding to the shit that capitalism is doing. But there's only so far that you can go with that. And I think that's where people are at now. We're all at this place where, like, we know that this doesn't work. We're anti-capitalist, but we don't know what we're pro. We don't know what to call ourselves. Like, even like you said, like, I'm not a communist. If I'm getting a knee-jerk response from somebody, it's always that. It's like, you're a socialist or you're a communist. And I'm like, well, like you said,
first of all, define that shit.
Right,
Who's calling me?
Right,
what
tell me what those mean.
I don't know what you're saying. Tell me what you mean.
I didn't say that because I don't actually know. And like, I don't think there is one perfect solution. And I don't think whatever these solutions are, like, some of the most effective solutions that we're ever going to see probably don't exist yet. But like, it's because we're in the in-between. Like, that's the era that we collectively have to live through. And that sucks and it's annoying, but like, here we are. So the thing that I've been trying to tell people too is the fact that you can't imagine what's past capitalism. That in itself is also by design. That is by design of capitalism. And there's a guy named Mark Fisher who wrote a lot. He was a music writer, but then he, like, towards the end of his life and his career, started writing really, really intensely more about capitalism. And he coined this, I think he coined it, I don't want to say for sure, but I'm pretty sure he coined the phrase called capitalist realism, and it's the name of one of his books too. But basically, the concept of capitalist realism is that it's easier to imagine the end of the world than it is to imagine the end of capitalism. And like, right, it's so devastating.
The rapture.
Right, yeah, and you were talking about the rapture, like, it's by design to make you feel like there is no other alternative, like there is nothing past this and this is it. That was what happened back in like 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell. People were calling this, philosophers were calling this the end of history. And they didn't mean the end of the world. They meant the end of history in terms of humanity has now reached its peak optimization, and here's where we're going to stay. Capitalism has beat out communism. That was like the symbolism of the Berlin Wall, right? It was like communism has fallen, communism is over, capitalism has proven itself as the best system because it's beat out all the others, right? Because it beat out everybody else, it must be the best system. It's the one that's best for humanity. Here we are. History, as we know it, is over because then human progress is no longer going to be about fighting over how to run our world. We've got our system now, we can just start running it. That was the whole concept. And that was really what people believed. And like, that's also why communism is always positioned as this foil to capitalism, as like, this is the only other alternative. And look, it lost, right? Capitalism beat it out. So therefore, why should we look for anything else? This is the perfect system. This is the most optimal system for humanity. And we know that's not true because it's destroying our planet. So it clearly cannot be the best system for humanity. But
it's the best system, but people can't even get paid $20 an hour. Best
right?
system
Like,
of the world.
Right. And I'm always like, best for who though? Because yeah, it is the best for some people, for a very select few, but like that's not all of humanity.
Best system and genocide's happening.
Right.
Crazy.
There's clearly no better way we could do this.
No.
Yeah. So I feel like that softening and like that, like to use Ari's words, like the great defrosting for me was really that of being like, we need to obviously to embrace nuance and stop being so black and white about like it's either capitalism or communism. No, and recognize that like you were fed that belief. But the point I was getting at with the great defrosting and this like softening and like you said how we need to be learning relational skills in this time is really because capitalism and this idea of maximizing the optimization of everything, right? I said this in my course this week and I was like, damn, I fucking said that. But I was like, the end result of self-optimization, right? A fully self-optimized system. The end result of that is isolation, because the idea is that you would never need another human. That's the end of the road for that, right? If you take that to its conclusion, that's what it is. The end result is isolation. I don't need anybody else, basically. And we know that's not conducive to anyone's health. So we need to be learning these relational skills, because the more that you are connected in a web of support, community, whatever it is, the less you feel even the need to optimize yourself. You're not going to feel that pressure to constantly be maximizing if the threat of survival is not looming over your head, because you've actually got some tangible support in your life. My godmother has her master's degree in anthropology. And I remember when she did her master's thesis, she used her own mom's group as a case study for her thesis because they all had young children at the time. And her thesis was basically just about like the more community structure, the more people that are in your life, the more actual community support that is in your life, the less relevant money becomes, which makes perfect sense to me. Because I'm like, well, yeah, money is just a representation of resources, but if you have the resources, you don't need the money. That was a long time ago that she did that thesis, and it just kind of sat with me for a long time. And I've witnessed it in her life, all the ways that they've been able to structure their life with or without money due to the presence of like an actual structured support system. I think for a lot of people, it sounds really difficult and kind of nebulous, like go out and find your people, build your community. Like, what does that mean? Most of us have never even learned community building skills, right? But what's accessible to just start is like, yeah, just start learning how to relate to other people. The community will follow, but you have to learn how to relate and how to process your emotions in a way that isn't, you don't have to process them in isolation, but you need to learn how to handle your emotions and feel them in a way that's not damaging or resulting in more isolation. Because none of us are going to survive if we can't do that for each other.
I think people forget that money is a symbol of resources. It's not the actual resource. Like if you had no food and you had $1 million, like, good luck, bitch. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
Right.
yeah.
There's times when I've been like super broke or like, oh, there's no money in my account, but I'm like, there's no money in my account because I've paid the bills that will keep me housed. And then also I have food in my kitchen, and like I wake up every day and I'm loved. You know, I go to sleep every night in a warm bed next to the person I love, and that is in itself like a small miracle. So I was talking about this with my first guest in the first episode, Stella Gold, and they were talking about this too, about different types, different feelings of wealth and different versions of wealth, and how it's not a bad thing to necessarily want wealth in your life, but also that you can, even as an anti-capitalist, you can desire wealth, but it's also about changing your ideas of what wealth means and how wealth is represented. Because yeah, truly at the end of the day, I feel like if I'm going to bed and my kid is safe at home, my husband's safe at home, I'm safe at home, that's the richest you can be. You know, to me, that's like the richest you can be. Everybody you love is safe and in their beds at the end of every day. That's the whole goal, you know, of every single day, is to get everybody safe in their beds at the end of it. So
no, literally, like, and there's this phrase I'll see going viral sometimes where it's like secure attachment is a new generational wealth, or like having a loving family growing up is the new generational wealth. And it's like, no, but actually, like, because I grew up with insecure attachment, you know, if we're going to use the lens of attachment theory,
you're using it appropriately because you're describing the relationship between you and your parents. So
yeah,
that's how it should be used.
Right. So I grew up, you know, having an insecure attachment. I did have my physical needs met pretty much my entire childhood. We did not have a lot of money, but we had always food. We had a safe home. We had all those things. Cool. But I was emotionally neglected, and so that happened, right? And I was not even neglected. It's not always their fault. Like, people take the attachment theory like it's their parents' fault. Like, honestly, it was very circumstantial.
It's
And it's also
also
generational trauma.
circumstantial. Like I tell people that too. I'm like, I was emotionally neglected, but my mom had me at 16 and was raising me by herself. So she's not going to be that mature as a
Surprise.
parent.
Surprise that led to an outcome of emotional neglect. That's crazy.
Right.
But all of a sudden these losers know what they're talking about when it's called daddy issues. But anyways, like, I'm like, y'all are so dumb. Anyways. Okay, but like I grew up with that. But then, like, with my sister, she had me. She had a sister that was 14 years older than her, who was in therapy, who was studying psychology and all these other things, and who could see my toddler sister as a whole human. Crazy how that works. She was the most well behaved with me, and I also respected her autonomy. Crazy, crazy.
Right.
Anyways, must be a coincidence. Anyways, but because of that, I, you know, kind of was there for her a lot, and I've been a constant secure figure to her. And now she's a teenager, and I'll just like see her go through things that, like, my dad will like say something in a kind of rough tone, and like for me as a child self, that would have shut me down.
Right.
I would have gotten upset. And she's just like, oh, whatever. Papa just be like that sometimes. And I'm just like, is this secure attachment?
Right.
And like, I'm giving a very micro example, but like witnessing the difference between how she was raised and how I was raised, the reason secure attachment is relevant and why it is quote unquote generational wealth is because people who have grown up with this sense of security, this emotional and physical sense of security, that people care about them, that people love them, that even if they make a mistake, like, that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. These people are more likely, if some fuck shit happens as a grown up, they're going to say, I won't stand for this, or this is not right, or I need to do something differently.
Or just I'm out.
Yeah. Or I'm out.
Yeah.
There's no one way secure attachment looks like. In fact, sometimes secure attachment behaviors look the same as insecure attachment behaviors. It's not about the behavior. Always, it's about where's that behavior coming from and what outcome and result is that leading to, how is that landing relationally, etc. But yeah, like, that is the real generational wealth, because the real riches, 90%, maybe 99% of people want at the end of the day is to like have safety, have love and care, have food, have shelter, have temperature regulation, you know, whether it's hot or cold, whatever it might be, and like be comfortable and like do work that's meaningful in some way. I feel like that is what most human beings want. And like, even like people fucking argue about gender all day, it's like, you realize like even if you believe there are only two genders, that men and women have a lot more in common than they have different. Like it's
Right.
all the same parts remixed differently. And also there are no two genders. Intersex people exist. A whole
There's no
different
like
stat.
male brain and female brain. That's
No,
nothing.
not a thing. There's no male hormone, female hormone. Turns out we all
Oh
have
my God.
testosterone actually.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Tell me about it. I'm like, the hairs on my chin let me know I got some fucking testosterone going on after I had this kid. Okay, the
Uh-huh.
hormones are making themselves
I
known.
still got Mars in my chart. Please do not get me fucked up. I had my Mars conjunct my ruler of the ascendant.
Yep. I like that you brought up secure attachment because I struggle a lot with that just in terms of attachment theory and the way that people usually are using them to talk about like their adult relationships. But what I
Mhm.
find very effective is also to use, at first I didn't like this. I had to come
Mhm.
around to it. At first I didn't like it, but now I do. When people use attachment theory to talk about money, I'm like, this
Mm.
actually does make perfect sense. At first I was like, no.
Mhm.
And then I had to like think critically for a minute. And I was like, it does make sense because if attachment theory is about how you as a child, and your parent, and how you achieved safety around them, right? Whatever that looks like. Also, who teaches you, who gives you your fundamental beliefs about money? Your
Yeah.
parents, like your living situation, your environment as a kid, all of these things also shape the way that you feel about money. It's so funny because when I used to do financial astrology readings for people, we would talk about money, but then so much of it would end up being about their families and their childhood anyway. Or they
Right.
come in wanting to talk about like the next year of their business, and suddenly they're like, okay, so when I was 7, like, my dad had to file for bankruptcy and it affected me in these ways. Yeah, that is actually the important shit to be talking about. And I think all of this ties together. Like, with money
Yeah.
and the financial shame that people feel, and like how in capitalism that shame is really a tool. It's a tool of control is what I've come to kind of
Mhm.
realize about it, to make you feel ashamed of your finances, because there's a difference between guilt, shame, and embarrassment, right? All of those are
Yep.
different things, and I think a lot of people understand feeling embarrassed about their finances, and a lot of people understand feeling guilty about the way that they make purchasing decisions, just all that pressure that we have to like never do any harm under capitalism. And then there's the shame, and it's really hard for people to look at that because of the way shame works, right? Shame is like, it's your fault and you just need to fix it, right? Like you
Yeah.
just have
I'm
to do
just
something about it.
bad and that's it.
Yeah,
Right.
and like it's on you. You have to change this about yourself, and then your money situation will get better. That shame is just so strong. And it's why I do everything I do, because I'm like, if you can just for a second put aside the idea that like it's all on you and this is all your fault, and that if you can set aside the concept that like you're lazy if you're not always trying to optimize yourself, just put those aside for just a second and then really look
Mhm.
at what's going on and what's working against you. I'm like,
Yeah.
I've been accused of like telling people to have like a victim mindset, or like to not take accountability. And I'm like, there's time for accountability and there's time for responsibility. Most people are trying to operate outside of their sphere of influence when it comes to capitalism. Most people believe that their little individual $5 purchases are really going to make a huge difference. I think you should still do that if it feels good for you and it's accessible for you, but also understand that there's things working against you that are so much bigger. And that's not to make you feel doom or feel helpless, but just to make you understand the shame you feel, the guilt you feel about not doing the right things, or not making the right purchasing decisions, or not being good enough with your money, right? Like all of those things are just keeping you distracted over here, feeling bad about yourself, and not looking at the ways that the outer system is affecting you. Your sphere of influence is very real. Individual responsibility is still very much there and real. But I
Yeah.
think most people's sphere of influence is actually much smaller than they're imagining it to be. And that contributes to the shame.
I agree. Like money, so attachment theory is about how, as a child, did you get your needs met? My therapist would say I've earned secure attachment, even though I grew up with avoidant and anxious, a mix. If you have trauma, you're gonna have a mix. It's always a spectrum.
Yeah.
Attachment theory is not black and white.
Yeah.
Please, I can't stand it when people talk like that. So it's about you as a child getting your needs met or not met, and like how you navigated that. That is what your attachment style talks about. And then also then your adult experiences layer on top of that, da 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 da, whatever, right? And then how you get your needs met might change and adapt depending on First, the core is that childhood experience, and then all the other experiences come on top of that. Money now, as an adult, is also how you get your needs met. Money was also relevant as a child, but
Yes.
usually, again, this is a very America centric thing I'm about to say. Like,
Yeah.
most children are not working, like in terms of like under teenage age in America.
Right.
Like, maybe I babysat and stuff, and that is sure maybe privilege in some lens. So like, acknowledge that there are children working in lots of places, even in America.
Right.
And you're experiencing money more indirectly as a child, generally speaking.
Mhm.
As an adult, it is a much more direct thing. You are directly responsible. So that is where like attachment theory and like finances overlap, because it's about getting your needs met. And honestly, so many people, like, if you're new to attachment theory, or like if it gets really intellectual and heady really fast, here's what I actually recommend. What are your needs? What are your needs and desires right now? You don't need to figure out all the academic psychology of it all. Like, literally be like, what are my needs and what am I not getting met? You know, you were talking about the anti-capitalist and like the use of the word anti earlier. Sometimes we need to know what we're against,
Mhm.
or what we don't have, or what we don't like, to create space to work towards solutions and answers and
Oh,
the
yeah.
things on the other side, right? So like, that's why I still like the phrase anti-capitalist, and malefics exist in our solar system. Okay, like, we get to say no to things, we get to be anti things, and that's okay. People, I think, try to use things as like gotcha sometimes. Not
Oh, yeah.
everyone, I think words do matter, but like, this whole gotcha culture of like, oh, I found a weird loophole. Again, you're not engaging with people as humans, and so therefore we're
Right.
not actually having a real conversation. With the Great Defrosting, as Ari Felix coined, and like your experience of like the softening post election, or like as the election results came in. And for me, I had all the feelings. I woke up all fucking, I was crying, I was
Yeah.
yelling, I was calm. And when I was experiencing the calmness, though, I was like, is this dissociation? And I was like, oh, it's not dissociation. I'm actually calm because I actually know my values. And there are things I'm secure in. So even if you have insecure attachment of some way, whether you're anxious, avoidant, a mix of both, you're going to have secure come through in some way. Because again, it's all a spectrum. So it all exists within you. Security and like calmness is also a thing. It's not always dissociation. And the reason I had that security is because I'm secure in my values, you know? And again, I'm human, I'm imperfect, but because compassion is one of my values, if I fuck up, like, I got myself, you know? And like, that I
Yeah.
think is actually security. And like, that's what I think with money, like the way I approach money in my business has really transformed, because it's like, what are my actual needs? Oh, do I have my bills paid? Yeah. Okay, cool. Then I don't have to fucking freak out right now.
But yeah, on the calmness too, what you're saying is like, yeah, you're aligned with your values. And also I think because you know the value of the work that you do, and you know that you have a vehicle through which to like enact your values. So it's less daunting than being like, oh my God, what do I do? How do I mobilize? Right? You're like, I have a vehicle. I have something that can affect change in the world automatically. But on the needs first thinking, I love that you brought that in on like a personal, like a more nocturnal scale, because I've been thinking a lot about a needs first thinking on a grand diurnal scale. Like you were saying, like, what are my needs? And I'm always thinking, what are the collective's needs, right? Or like in any given in any given situation, what is the need and is it being met? I don't want to try to take credit or anything. I'm pretty sure that this type of thinking has been established in a lot of leftist spaces already. So I'm just kind of like arriving at the conclusion on my own, but like it's already existed. And I think what's missing a lot too is that just being like, it's actually just about meeting needs. And right now we have had this constant problem, this constant underlying problem where not everyone has the ability to meet their needs. For me, I'm like, I'm just still trying to get there, you know, just to the fact where like people have their needs met, or if they don't, then it's fairly simple. It's not a life or death situation. It's not like excruciating labor to get those needs met. It should be fairly simple to get your needs met. I've forgot to mention this submission specifically, but I've been thinking about it because it's been on my screen this whole time and I realized I should say it out loud. But one of the submissions that I got for this podcast, which I have people send in, they're 100% anonymous. Some of them are questions, some of them are just like confessions or things people need to get off their chest, which I'm totally here for. And we've been talking about all this stuff with family and how the root causes of money attachment happen. This person said, I was a truant and a runaway at 13. I'm over 50 now and I have no savings. It doesn't take much to derail an entire life. Just do it as a kid and watch the magic happen. And when I read that, my heart broke a little bit. And so I'm sending so much love and a big warm hug to whoever this is. Because I feel that so deeply, and it's devastatingly true. Like, it does not take much to derail, especially financially, especially when you're living in capitalism. Poverty is self-perpetuating in this system. Like, you are actively punished for being poor through things that make you more poor. It sucks that that's the foundation that we all live within, but also to be dealing with trauma like this, obviously being a runaway at 13 is really difficult. And I related to this because the snowball effects of poverty and the uphill battle that it is to escape it are, they can take up an entire lifetime. And that shame, right, that can come with it. Because I feel like being over 50, I have no savings. That's a point of shame, right? Because that's something that we're told is if you should have savings. Like, if the word should is popping up, you know that shame is right around the corner. It's you should have X amount of dollars saved up by the time you're X age, or, you should be able to retire. You should have a 401k. Like you said, everything's circumstantial, like the markers of success for this person, right? It's like, hey, you survived. First of all, you survived. You're 50 years old, right? And maybe money's not great and there's a lot of shame involved with that. But the markers of success are different for people who grow up with trauma, or, like you said, grow up with like insecure attachment or emotional neglect. And I think that's where a lot of the financial shame that I talk to people about comes from, because I talk to a lot of neurodivergent folks, a lot of people who have had trauma in their lives. And so much of the shame is about feeling that you're having a late start, or that your definitions of success aren't the capitalist definitions of success. And the needs first thinking, I feel, is a really good soothing balm over that, because we are fed this idea in America that everyone's a pre-millionaire. Like, you could just become a millionaire. You just have to find the right thing.
You're not making 20K a year. You're pre-rich.
Yeah, you're just pre-rich.
You're in your come up era.
Yeah. And so when that myth does not come true for you, and then you think it's your fault, it's not your fault. It's that your markers of success and your markers of things that you can feel good about aren't the things that capitalism has taught you to feel good about. And that's actually a good thing, but it's just that you have to really get through all those layers of shame first. Right. And that's the hard part.
That was a really heartbreaking submission. So much love to this person. When I studied public health, I learned about the social determinants of health, which essentially are like, if you scroll through TikTok, you would think the outcomes of health are based on calories in and calories out and 30 grams of protein. And
are you moving your body?
Right. And guess what? Even if you're not moving your body, you're worthy. You're a worthy human being. You're actually, doesn't make you less worthy all of a sudden. Plot twist. Who would it gagged a lot of people, actually.
It really did.
And same with finances. Just because you didn't get your needs met, and just because you went through all that you went through, didn't change your worthiness at any point. Sometimes that can seem so whatever. Is sometimes when I am in a more resistant place, something like that sentiment seems so whatever. Like,
right, it's annoying.
Okay, like, it doesn't matter that it didn't matter that I didn't deserve to be treated that way. I still got treated that way.
It still happened.
That is also true. That is really valid. And also the systemic poverty. I brought up the social determinants of health because it's like all of these societal systemic factors have a way bigger outcome than, is this one individual getting enough fiber?
Literally, like, you can take all your supplements and you can sleep with your phone away from your head so that you don't get radiation. And then the fucking chemical plant down the street can make a mistake, a whoopsie, and then your air is full of cancer. Yeah. And now you're going to die at 50 years old. Even though you individually did everything right, those are so much bigger than individual decisions.
Exactly. And I see finances the same way. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if someone has a theory that's
Mm-hmm.
basically the social determinants of financial health or something, but
Probably,
that's what
yeah.
I really want to tell this person who made the
Mm-hmm.
submission. Yeah, the system failed you. You didn't fail you. We grew up like working class, then got to middle class, but then my dad get laid off, so like, complicated family history, but nothing as extreme as what this person has
Mm-hmm.
experienced. And even then, the system failed me so many times. I think about
Mm-hmm.
like, I worked so hard to build my savings up. And then I got one tax bill and I needed to change the tires on my car and I wiped almost my
Yep.
entire
There
savings.
goes your
Like,
savings.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm a 20 something year old person. So I can't imagine it feeling like that. Cause I think of what time does, like what Saturn does, is it like
Mm-hmm.
makes things more rigid. Like, the
Mm-hmm.
way neural path work. Like you can have
Mm-hmm.
neuroplasticity at any age, but unless you work on it, it becomes more and more rigid over time.
Yeah.
I don't have any like advice per se, rather just like a lot of compassion and like understanding. Also, if you look at this through the attachment lens, if you grew up with a lot of money trauma, you're likely going to be. What I want to say is like, I don't know if Super Mama Nova or Supernova Mama is on Twitter, if she's the original coiner of this phrase. I associate this phrase with her. I see her say this repeatedly, which is misbehavior is unmet needs. And
Yep.
she is a, conscious parenting expert and speaks about that. So like that's the lens of that. But
Mm-hmm.
like, when we accidentally spend too much money on a shopping spree, or we have this money saved but we're hoarding it and we have this huge amount of rigidity around the money that we do have, or you feel ashamed of asking for help around money, or you avoid looking up anything about money because you feel so much shame around it. All of those behaviors that from the lens of attachment theory is like anxious behavior, anxious attachment, the result of that with getting your needs met, like that is self-soothing behavior also. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is you
Oh, yeah.
doing the best you can to like take care of yourself. And Reagan's the reason we have this weird welfare queen, single mom stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
And like this whole idea of like poor people shouldn't have nice things. I'm sorry. That is just a human thing to want nice things, to want beautiful things, to have things to take care of yourself and your loved ones. And
I feel like if
and
you're
so
poor and you I don't know, you happen upon like $500 to buy like a Nintendo Switch or something, and that brings like
yes,
a little bit more joy into your life. Like,
that is worth it.
yeah.
Exactly. I don't have a perfect words. I think you summed it up. What I was trying to say is just be kind to yourself for the behaviors that capitalism will tell you are wrong, that you shouldn't have done. Like, oh, that was a bad financial move. That was a bad thing. You were probably trying to get some sort of need or want met, or maybe you needed a way to cope with your shitty ass job. And
Mm-hmm.
so coming home to play your Switch was like the best part of your day. Like, whatever those things are, like, I just have a lot of compassion and I'm
Mm-hmm.
just really sorry that the system failed you. And I hope, like, just that little bit of like psychology and public health perspective can just, like, if you're listening to this and you're not this person but you can relate, just be 1% kinder to yourself today and maybe 1% kinder tomorrow. Like, that is actually anti-capitalist. It's not in this like bullshit like, oh, joy is revolutionary to excuse, like, I don't know,
It's not trying to bypass,
spending.
like, yeah.
No
It's not
bypassing.
bypassing in any way. It's
But
just,
you are a part of the liberation that you are
yeah.
fighting for. So you deserve that too. Like, and it's not even
Mm-hmm.
about deserving. Like, you are a part of this liberation movement. And so, like, we need to move like that, right? Like, it's not just about treating other people like whole humans. It's about treating
Mm-hmm.
yourself and myself like a whole human. And that's still something I struggle with. I was engaging in some negative self-talk last night and I just had to let myself be there, to be honest, because that's just where I was at.
Yeah, and it's true, like the being compassionate to yourself doesn't weaken you. It actually does make
No.
you a stronger person so that you can do the things you need to do just to get your needs met. That's also really what I hope for everybody. I mean, it's true. Viewing yourself as a whole human is made difficult by capitalism, right? Like we are
Yeah.
even taught to view ourselves as just machines to be optimized or just like
Mm-hmm.
a project to be mastered or whatever. There's times for self-improvement and there's times for growth. And then there's also times for just fucking vibing out and existing and like living your life,
Yeah.
healing through doing nothing.
Mhm.
You have to allow space for all of that. So yeah, I really love that too. Like you have to look at yourself as a whole human too. That compassion really is anti-capitalist because capitalism does not view you as a whole human. Certainly not. So
Mm. It views you as a commodity, an
Mhm.
output producer, a
Mhm.
productivity producer, or a customer. Like, those are your roles. Like, you don't get to
Yeah.
be a full human with all of your experiences and nuances and your family shit and
Mhm.
your cool interests and the facts that you know. Capitalism does not create room for that. This is your individual responsibility. Like, you get to create room for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually something that's within your sphere of influence that can like make a
Mhm.
lasting positive impact. Yeah, that's something that you can do today that it doesn't cost anything and will actually move the world forward, even though it doesn't
Mhm.
feel like that immediately. It is. I don't know who said it first, but it's been said that like the wars, quote unquote, of the future won't be fought on battlefields, they'll be fought in our minds and our hearts. And I really feel like that's what's going on with like anti-capitalism right now. More people's minds are coming around to it, but I think also, especially since COVID in the last 4 years, their hearts are really starting to get invested in finding something else because the pain is just so great and the grief is just so strong. And we watched how capitalism was prioritized during COVID when people were literally dying. And it's just like,
Right.
you know,
Instead of like having mask discourse, okay, like if some people don't like masks, why can't we talk about air filters in public
right.
spaces? Why can't we?
Exactly.
There are so many, and instead, like people just want to debate over these like little things. Like, honestly, I don't argue with people online, like
Right.
unless like I think it's funny, which is very, very rare. And it's because I don't waste my breath. Like, I'd rather talk to people who are in my sphere of influence, and fucking Billy Bob Joe on the internet, who could be a bot potentially, is
Right.
not worth my breath.
And they're not coming to you to engage in good faith and open their mind
Absolutely not.
and learn new
No.
things. So,
Yeah,
and those are rather the people that I would like to talk to,
same.
like we both said. So much love and compassion to this person. And also, yeah, to
Mhm.
anybody listening, this is a really good conversation. And I thank you for being willing to do it. But I think my main takeaways are one, that your sphere of influence is smaller than you think, but within that influence, you
Yeah.
have more power than you think.
Right.
And also, if money is a constant thorn in your life, obviously there's capitalism, that's always there. But
Mhm.
if money is something that you're constantly dealing with your life and it feels like a recurring pattern, something you can't get out of, it may be worth looking into your childhood. Like it may be worth doing some of that inner child early life work to kind of figure out where these stories came from,
Yeah, I have one thought,
Mm-hmm.
one like last added thought. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this down before we started recording, but I was thinking about the exaltation of the moon being in the first decan of Taurus. And so that means also the fall of the moon is in the first decan of Scorpio. And so, like, if you're new to Astro, basically the highest point and the lowest point of the moon. Okay.
Right.
And the moon is connected to a concept called fortune, which is essentially like fate, your circumstances, the physical things in your life, like essentially all the things you can't control. It's like your physical survival and like life. That's the moon. And the moon exalts in the first decan of Taurus. And one of the themes of this decan is worry. And it's actually associated with the tarot card 5 of Pentacles, which is kind of, I guess you could say, a poverty theme shows up in the card.
Yeah.
A lack, scarcity, coldness,
Othering, yeah.
othering. And when I was thinking, I've been contemplating decans a lot, and like for this one, I was like, what the heck? Like, that's an interesting combination. But I think about how a baby communicates their needs. They cry. There is a sense of worry of, I don't have food. I'm worried I don't have food. Or I need hugs. I need cuddles. I'm going to cry. Or I need something. I'm uncomfortable in my diaper.
Yeah.
That worry sparks the action that's required to get your needs met. That expression of like pure life. Like, life does not come out like rainbows and sunshine. Like, giving birth is not chill in any way.
Babies are born hungry. I don't know if many people understand this. When a baby comes out, they're fucking hungry.
Wow, I did not know that.
Like you have to
That
feed
makes
them.
sense.
You have to feed them very soon, or they just die.
Oh gosh, wow,
Yeah.
that's wild.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me of the second half of this, which is the fall of the moon, which is the first decan of Scorpio, and the biggest theme of the first decan of Scorpio is hunger. And it's a double Mars ruled decan, essentially like the lowest point. Like I think about Mars in its nocturnal domicile, like thinking about being in a battlefield at night. Like you can't see shit. You have
Just
to
swinging
use your
swords around.
yeah, no, literally. You have to be stealthy. You have to be strategic. Like that is Scorpio energy. And the first decan in particular is very hardcore. I would say it's probably the lowest point in the entire zodiac, in terms of like felt sense, like literally low to the ground, like snakes and bugs and like stuff like that, like grass. That hunger and that worry, like there's this opposition here in the exaltation and the fall of the moon. And Scorpio 1 is about fighting for your survival. And Taurus 1 is about like worrying. So you get into actions to take care of those worries, to quell those worries. Because, like, even if you're not worried, if you're taking care of someone, it's likely that they have worries that you will have to like combat as they navigate through life. So I don't know. That felt relevant astrologically.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because the sun just passed through that first decan of Scorpio very recently. It was tough. That's a beautiful point to end on, just in terms of feeling like at the bottom. And I think many people probably feel that way right now. The good news, this is the Capricorn in me. I'm like, the good news about being at the bottom is you get to climb to the top.
Yes, my Scorpio 1 moon concurs.
Right? Like, that means that you have something to do with yourself and your time.
Yeah.
So this was really awesome. Thank you for being so willing to share and offer your wisdom to folks.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Let the people know what you're doing, how they can work with you.
So if you want a fun free quiz, I have a quiz called Playlist Prophecy. If you go to my Instagram or Threads, like the link should be there, or my website. So Playlist Prophecy is like a free fun quiz. You can go get like a divination answer through music. Actually, as we were wrapping up, I was thinking about the song Hard Times by Paramore. So that is the Playlist Prophecy for this episode.
I like that. I'll put that in the notes.
Yes. I also have a 6-week one-on-one program. Basically, like if you want an astrologer, a meditation teacher, like an energy worker, healer, like in your back pocket, think about just having 6 weeks of like dedicated time to reconnect to your values and walk your walk. You know, this is astrology support. I'm talking about electional astrology, meaning like you need an auspicious time to do a thing. Let's get her done. Like basically throughout the 6 weeks, I am there as your person on your team. And it's meant to be a zap into alignment, and you can continue working. I do like long time work, or that could be just it, a nice 6 weeks, short and sweet, get back into alignment and like do your thing, because we need people in their purpose more than ever. And I don't say that in a weird new agey way. I just mean like we all contribute to the liberation by being ourselves. And so that's what that program is for, the people who are ready for that. And then have a rotation of one-on-one sessions and a podcast. So podcast for my free listeners, it's called Thinking About Life, and I just yap about random shit on there. And then one-on-one sessions, right now I have Playlist Prophecy sessions. Sometimes I'll have astrology sessions, like human design, healing, hypnotherapy. I really do a lot, so it's hard to always sum up the things that I do, but just check my socials and my website and all the places, and you will see the ways to work with me that are most current.
I heartily support all of that. Neha is like a spiritual Swiss Army knife. So yeah, you can trust her.
Wow. I like that. I'm gonna like write that down.
Yeah. So yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for doing this.
Spiritual Swiss Army knife indeed. Wasn't that fantastic? I told you, Neha is one of the smartest, wisest, coolest people I know. And honestly, what a blessing to be able to talk about these topics together. So thank you, Neha, for your time. I also wanted to take a moment here. I wanted to advertise some things to you. I have finally decided to launch budgeting sessions for sex workers. These are pay what you can. So no obligation to pay anything at all. This is just a service that I've been wanting to give back to the sex worker community. I was a sex worker for over 7 years, and the one thing that I always regret from my time in that is that I wasn't able to make that money go further. And I never took the steps to give myself a long-term safety net. So I want to help other sex workers avoid that same fate if I can. I spent 5 years in an MLM, and in that time probably drew up hundreds of budgets and spending plans and saving plans for people in my downline. So I'm not a CPA, I'm not a financial advisor, I cannot give you legal advice, but if you're a sex worker and you want some help with budgeting your funds, or even just looking at your numbers and getting the scope of what's coming in and what's going out, and maybe where you can make some adjustments. It doesn't have to be a big deal. And like I said, it's pay what you can. So I'm booking those for January now. And I'm also booking in January financial astrology readings again. I haven't done these in over a year now. So I'm very excited to be bringing those back. And if you were hearing this before December 2nd, the year ahead reports, you can either do a sit-down hour-long session with me where we talk about your 2025 financially, astrologically, or you can get it in written form, which takes about 4 weeks for me to turn those around. If you are hearing this before December 2nd, there's still 30% off, and you can also get an introductory reading with me over your chart that just goes over the basics of the financial areas of your chart and some pointers for dealing with the emotional side of your relationship to money. Very excited to be working with people one-on-one again. Like I said, it's been over a year and I've missed it so much. Really excited to start meeting with y'all in January. Lots of cool stuff coming down the pipeline here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please share, subscribe, rate this podcast 5 stars. And you're a star to me, just so you know that. If you've made it this far and you're still listening, you are a star and you have a special place in my heart. Okay, I will talk to you on the full moon.